As an empathic person, a hypersensitive person, um, an introvert, and a woman, I have asked myself this several times, and I'm always confused. Am I being too sensitive, or are my feelings valid and justified? Hello, welcome or welcome back to my podcast. My name is Arielle, and this is Feeling My Feelings, where I finally feel my feelings after years of dissociating from them, after years of invalidating myself, and after years of feeling like I had to mask my sensitivity in order to look stronger. And I really wanted to talk about this, like the question of whether or not you're being too sensitive, because that's a question I've gotten like my entire life. And for a lot of my life, I suppressed my sensitivity in order to not get this question. But now that I've gotten older, now that I've gotten a lot of health issues, mental health confusion, now that I have arrived at this point where I'm like, oh, feeling my feelings, this podcast, like feeling my feelings is kind of the solution to how to heal most of the shit in my life. Like, now I realize that sensitivity is not, first of all, a curse. It's not a problem. It is necessary, especially in a world of people who block out their feelings and create problems as a result. So, obviously, she is a little bit, she's got some feelings about this. But I have these big feelings that I felt I had to suppress because the people around me were always uncomfortable. And I think the more that you have to stuff down those feelings, the harder it is to really regulate, when you really have big emotions that need to be felt. In addition, I identify as neurodivergent. So I also naturally kind of have this my body is a little too honest. So I naturally am stimulated, am overwhelmed by emotions. So it is harder for me to really regulate them. And so while I can for a little bit of time, eventually I will react because my brain chemistry is a little bit different than neurotypical people. So you could say I was born more sensitive, but is it too sensitive? All right. So anyway, let me just say again, if you are questioning this, it is for a good reason, because if you're like me and if you identify as neurodivergent, or if you basically have been used to environments where they don't want to hear your feelings, where they're constantly shutting you down, and unfortunately, if you are in repeated situations where you're being gaslit or abused or in something else toxic, you may always be confused as to whether or not your feelings are valid. And unfortunately, depending on the people you're around, especially if they're narcissistic, if they're manipulative, if they're toxic or emotionally immature and unavailable in any way, you basically are used to feeling terrible. You're used to getting someone who will be really strong and really convincing and telling you, like, you're just being sensitive right now. Like, look at you. Like, look how you're reacting. Obviously, unfortunately, I have to tell you, I have my shit together and you are crying. You're yelling. You are making no sense. And maybe you should look at yourself and maybe you should, stop being so sensitive. And, all right, could be right, but either way, when someone tells you that, you immediately turn it inward. You immediately take it on as it's your fault. You immediately take blame for creating whatever situation is happening. And it is hard for you to determine whether or not your first feelings were right, or that person is just trying to manipulate you so that they don't take accountability for however they may have offended you. So, unfortunately, because we often have dysregulated reactions because we may need to cry because other people may be putting us situations in which we're having these big reactions. Like, we feel like we are the problem all the time. So, first of all, let me just say that just because you had a huge reaction and it was emotional does not equal that the other person was right and that you were too sensitive. It doesn't necessarily mean that you were right either, but the point is, we're in a situation, in a relationship, in an environment, whatever, that is causing you to react a certain way and is causing another person to not want to understand. And let's ask ourselves a couple of questions to understand whether or not we're being too sensitive. So, is a thing that's going on, is the comment, the action, the environment, whatever it is it discriminatory? Does it conflict with one of your morals and values, with your belief system? Like, unfortunately, this is still murky. This is still up for debate. This is still people saying like, come on, let's make fun of the Asians. Let's make fun of the Black people. It's all in good fun. I'm white and I rag on myself all the time. Like, I will say, at the very least, you're allowed to disagree and you're allowed to say, I do not feel respected by this comment and I do not want this. That's a personal thing, a personal value, a personal way of, like, this is what I believe to be discriminatory and this is just not what I like. And in general, I think, especially when it has to do with race, religion, with your gender, many people within the same group as you may agree. They may get annoyed by the same comments. And okay, obviously, my opinion is, I think the person that is being offended, the offendee or whatever, gets to be the decider about whether or not something is okay with them in general. And if it has to do with like your race, with like things that are natural to you, with like things that could be discriminatory, I can't convince everybody that of what I'm trying to say, but at the very least, I'm saying you're allowed to disagree and you're allowed to say that's not what I want. That's not how I want to be spoken to. And you can stand on that, and that's not too sensitive. That is a belief, and that is a value you hold, and that is how you want to be treated. Also in the category of you guys get to just disagree, and you get to decide how you want to be treated or not. Like, that's kind of the whole thing, right? Like, that has to do, that's probably like all these points I'm making, but in general, like, if it is a knock on your self-worth, if it is something like, oh, someone's making an offensive comment about like where you're at in your career or like your looks, which is super common. You know, like if someone's like, oh, you should fix your nose, you should get a nose job. And then you're like, no, I like my nose. And they're like, you're just being sensitive. I'm just saying it's, you know, you would look better with a different nose. That sort of thing. Okay, I'll get to the part where that is hurtful to your self-esteem, but that is actually super objective. And that is a lot easier to argue than my first point, so I'm glad that we're here. But anyway, who can really say what is the right look? Like, I don't know, what is the right nose? You know, like, even if it's something as a society standard, like, you still can't really say factually, like, oh, your nose looks bad, just fix it and stop being sensitive about it, and don't feel bad that I told you that. Like, that's an opinion. That's super objective. Same thing with career. Like, if someone's telling you, like, you should be making this amount of money by this time. Okay, so that sort of thing is more like, you know, are you offended because they said it in a way where they were like, I'm judging you for it? Or Alternatively, are they framing it in a way where it's like, I really want you to be able to make more money and I think you can do it, but, I support you. Like, that's a situation where I know, like, they could be more of a hard ass about it. They could be like, hey, I believe you. I think you can do it. Like, just make more money. That is also acceptable. But if it comes from a judgmental, like, ego based, like, kind of, and also in general, if they're trying to one up you, if they're trying to bully you, if they are in competition with you, you aren't being too sensitive if you're offended because you're like, that's not coming from a good place. That's coming from your opinion. That's coming from you wanting to assert like that you are better, or you want to be in a competition, or you just wanting to bully me. You just want to bring down my self-esteem because of whatever reason. So things like that, where it's an actual knock on you about something that really is objective, you can be offended about because it's like, so what was your point? Like, what do you want? Like, if you don't care about my well-being, then you're just generally being an asshole. So, unfortunately, we get into situations where we're around people who are really toxic and manipulative and who constantly gaslight you in order to gain control, in order to use you for their own gain. I think it's really important, and I hope, if you're constantly feeling confused or devalued or anything by another person, I really hope that you have the opportunity to speak to someone like a therapist. There's also a lot of hotlines for this. But in general, it's important to be able to recognize gaslighting. And this is something I'll link to a video that I did on gaslighting, something that I believe we should all be looking up as well. But if someone is constantly, if you are actually feeling hurt, if you are feeling constantly confused, if you are being put down, if you are also being confused as to like how you saw a situation happening and another person is shutting you down, another person is telling you, you're crazy, it went another way, then it's important to realize that not only are you not being too sensitive, but the other person is being really unhealthy and manipulative. So again, it's really hard because most of the time when we're in a situation where we're asking ourselves if we're being too sensitive, it is as a result of being around people who are always making you question that because they don't want to take accountability and because they are being somehow selfish. So it is really important to also speak to, trusted professionals, to mental health professionals, to ask, how can I determine if this partner, if this parent, if this person in my life is healthy to be around? Are they just toxic? So if you feel like you're constantly confused, and a big red flag is you cannot express yourself without feeling like you're going to get in trouble, without feeling like it's going to be twisted, without feeling like you're going to be unheard, or without feeling like you'll be heard. That's an indication at the very least that this person does not want to hear you, and they do not want to hear when they are offending. They don't want to be understanding. Okay, so let's look more closely at the people who are doing the offending. Can you see if they have a pattern of not wanting to admit feelings, if they don't want to be self-aware of themselves? Are they insecure people? Are they always putting other people down for their own gain? I'm hoping that we can start really looking at that as opposed to taking everything on as, something that's wrong with us. Also, here's the thing. Not everyone, I've said this several times, but not everyone is a narcissist, manipulative, toxic person. People have different levels of emotional maturity and availability. So you could be dealing with a narcissist, or you could be dealing with someone who just shuts down when it comes to emotions because they're really hard for them. You could be dealing with somebody who is so insecure or has so many suppressed feelings, has so many trauma related to whatever particular situation that you're dealing with, that they're just going to shut down and they're going to automatically be like, oh, you're sensitive about that. Like, you just have to grin and bear it. Like, I think that makes sense. But basically, what I'm saying is some people cannot open up to be emotionally available enough to be understanding. And so they may shut down, maybe aggressively so. Maybe it might take you by surprise how much someone shuts down whatever you're doing and tells you you're too sensitive because they can't deal with it. This is what we've known, but but I'm just saying I want to explain it because it's crazy. It's crazy when you generally like being around a person, you like this person as a whole, but you get to one of their limiting beliefs and blocks, and then they're projecting onto you, and you're like, la, 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 whoa, are you okay? Is that not? Oh, okay, But basically, what I'm saying is, it might just be their stuff. So even though they want to call you offensive, they're really just projecting. No, just this goes for people who are really overly positive, but because they've had to do that again to survive, or they needed to put up a front, or they needed to put on a mask in order to not get hurt and to not lose their sense of security. There are toxic positive. There are people who are toxically positive that do not see when things are wrong, who just want to uphold the status quo, that don't want to rock the boat because they're afraid of something else bad happening. However, that still makes it so the same groups, the same types of isolated and bullied people are still getting hurt. They're not solving that problem. They're just maintaining the status quo. They're also just saying everything's fine. There's nothing that needs to be changed. There's no problem. And, those same types of people become people pleasers. Those same types of people do not really dig into what they really want in life. Those same types of people end up, being too agreeable, being swayed too much by what other people think, and not really forming their own opinions and not living the lives that they want. So those are, the people that don't want to rock the boat, the people that are just pretending everything's fine, and also the people drinking the Kool-Aid of the offenders. Someday I wish upon them that they gain their own sense of self and their own brains. But for now, I will say to you that you're allowed to, feel like whatever they're saying is not correct. You get to be offended by them because even when they are positive, even though they don't want to rock the boat and they don't want to cause trouble, they are not considering your feelings still. And that still rocks the boat. I will say in general, if someone knows that something offends you, if someone knows that you have sensitivities or you would react to certain things, and they care about you and they want to maintain a relationship with you, they should be mindful. Or if they really hate it and if they think that you are too sensitive for them, then they are responsible for drawing boundaries, for speaking up, for being not in the relationship with you. So the other person is just as responsible for deciding whether or not your relationship, whatever it is for them. And if they keep wanting to maintain a relationship just based on their belief system and they don't want to take into account both of your belief systems, they are being selfish in some ways with your relationship. They're deciding that their way is the only correct way. And if they think it's too hard to work with you in order to make you feel better, if they think you're too sensitive, and if they think well, I have to make them tougher, I have to make them understand that my way is the right way, then they're not caring about your feelings right now. They're also wanting you to be a different version of yourself. And so all of that just feels like they're not accepting who you are in the present and what the present you needs. And yeah, maybe there's some times where you are overly sensitive, overly dramatic, and dysregulated. If that's the case, they can step away and you can, work on balancing yourself out without being confused by that person. But where it's at right now, in the situations that you're in, if you're constantly being in, I've had this actually happen a few times with people where I just realize like we don't have the same belief systems, but then I'll turn around and like I'll meet other people and I'll be like, oh, okay, I do work with them. We are on the same page. Like, and the thing is sometimes it's just not compatible. Like your belief systems just don't work together, which is fine. Other times, one person is being more selfish and the other person is suppressing and not allowing themselves to be their full selves, but they're still clinging on and they're still codependent on them. In general, is the thing in question violating a boundary? Like, obviously this goes into several things, but is it sexually not something that you want to do? If it's within your relationship, like, is it what you define as emotional cheating? Is it like, drawing a boundary as to like how much your parents should be involved in your life? Like, again, a lot of these things that some people are saying, are making you too sensitive. Maybe that's just, that is what you want in your life. That is the foundation of beliefs that you want to live by, that allow you to live, in your highest self-esteem and allow you to feel most respected. This is how you want to, this is how you want to be treated. That's it. That's it. Like, and if they are violating a boundary, you get to draw boundaries back with them or cut them off or whatever you feel like doing with them. You probably have to let go of the expectations of what you wanted this relationship to look like. Overall, I think a person who cares about you and loves you isn't going to completely shut you down when you say that something hurt your feelings and when you're feeling like something was offensive. So a person that truly cares about you will at least take the time to be like, wait, why was that? Let's talk about it. I don't want to make you feel that way. And that could be, open up a dialogue. And unfortunately, there can be times when you guys talk about it, but you still arrive at, but I disagree with you, but I don't think I'm offending you. And you can just be like, yeah, but I think you are. And again, it comes down to you believe in different ways of how to treat each other, basically. And it does feel sad because if you're like me, and you've been hypersensitive, you've probably experienced some level of emotional abandonment. And whenever someone doesn't care about how something offends you, or if they're not let me put it a different way. They could either not care at all and just be like, bitch, you're too sensitive. Or they could be like, I just think that you just need to think differently. Or I think that we just need to be tougher because you shouldn't crumble. You shouldn't feel bad about just these little things. This is not important. I don't think this is important. Like, if someone acts that way, then unfortunately that can feel worse to you if you've experienced being emotionally abandoned, because you are hit with this realization that this person that you wanted to understand your sensitivities, this person, especially if it's a romantic relationship or a parent or something, you want them to care about your feelings, but you may be in a situation where you realize they really can't like that. They're not showing up emotionally the way that I wish they could. And I don't believe I'm asking for too much. I think at this point, I want a certain type of person that doesn't have to work too hard to understand that. And that's okay for you to admit. And it's also okay that you care about a person who just isn't as emotionally available as you would like them to be, who isn't as emotionally mature probably as well as you would like them to be. But that is what is super difficult, because you may just feel like, oh, I'm asking them too much, or like I'm asking too much of them, or I'm always stressing them out now. Like I'm always making them feel bad, or I'm always making them feel like they're a terrible person. I grew up Asian. This is how I felt about everyone in my life. Okay. Like, I have always disagreed slightly, but I also feel like I am a person who's broken away from like a lot of our limiting beliefs and toxic habits, and I've been able to form more of my own opinions, and I've been able to break away from what people think were probably like dead end, I don't know, career paths, or like I've been able to differentiate myself and been able to feel more authentic and more fulfilled in ways that other people haven't. So this is where my ability to be sensitive and think differently is beneficial for me, despite whatever other people I care about are doing to keep themselves safe, you know? So it's unfortunately going to happen where people you care about are not going to be more sensitive. They're not going to be more emotionally available for you. Doesn't mean that they don't care about you. It means that they are limited. And at some point, they needed to be for their own safety. And it's sad because that is always the heartbreaking point. That is always the hard point, because you're just like, I care about so many emotionally like stunted people. I also have my expectations for them, and I could argue that I know better and I could try to fix them. But in general, if that's taking away from your life, if you're constantly in this like mode where you're feeling crazy, where you're also making the other person feel bad, where you feel like shit because they like now they are making you feel bad for telling them that they made you feel bad, like that is a headache. That feels like we need something else. And at the very least, we get to be emotionally available and sensitive and take care of ourselves. So, last thing I'll say is basically, if you're at a point where someone's calling you too sensitive because you're having big reactions, because now at this point in your life or whatever has happened, you've become sensitive because of trauma, because of also maybe some things like me, like where you're neurodivergent. These are things that we get to nurture and take care of ourselves. Whatever the other person's opinion is, like, even if they're the one causing it, like, whatever's going on, we want to be able to not be in a constant state of anxiety, a constant state of fight or flight, a constant state of feeling hypersensitive to everything, to where we're reacting in a big dysregulated way. Like, we want to, I don't think that we're going to totally turn off the sensitivity. Like, we may be able to regulate it more. And so by that, I mean, every time someone upsets you, you don't have to feel like I'm being attacked, but next time someone offends you, you can now take all the things that we talked about in this video and be like, oh yeah, this is a them thing, or yeah, we're not agreeing, or I just need something different, or I just need to take care of myself. I need to, or we just need to communicate more, or we can just open up a dialogue, or I think we can work on this. Maybe we'll try for a little bit, like, instead of feeling like you're in a constant state of like, being gaslit, being abused, being traumatized, like, sometimes also I will say, even if you're no longer in relationships that are like that anymore, that could be a regular response that is still, being triggered over and over again in our bodies, because our bodies still remember, because our bodies still have this knee-jerk reaction to not feel safe. And so whatever's going on, we want to feel like we get to own our sensitivity, and we don't have to feel like we're being attacked all the time. So, yeah, again, like, I think in general, if you're feeling this way, don't just try to mask it. You're allowed to talk about, especially again with like a therapist or something like that, like talk to somebody about how you're having these big reactions and you think they're valid and you don't know if the relationships you're in are the right ones for you. And in general, we want to make sure that our sensitivities aren't going like to the unhealthy place. So, anyway, I will also say in general, most of the time you're not being too sensitive. Most of the time, if you're having a knee-jerk reaction about how someone's treating you, if you're having a gut feeling that something isn't sitting well with you, there's a reason. And on some level, you aren't being too sensitive. You are at the very least in a disagreement with a person, but a lot of the times that person could just be more mature. So either way, like, okay, I'm not one to just completely tell you you were always right, because I don't want to be overly biased towards the sensitive person. But I will say the person getting hurt, like, is not the only one at fault, usually. Okay. So, and we don't even have, and the fact that you might be in a situation where you're caring about faults or you doing tit for tat or whatever, like, if you're in some sort of relationship that you think is based on love, that you think is based on more care and understanding, if you're expecting that, then it could be worked on and communicated. And if you don't feel like that, if you don't feel like you can speak up, if you don't feel like you can communicate or reach understandings, then this is obviously a situation where they're not going to care about being more sensitive. Like, and they will just continue to call you too sensitive. So, yeah, I mean, that's all. But trust me, I have been questioning this my entire life. This is the question of my life. And I am finally starting to own the sensitivity and kind of transition out from this overly like basically like trauma bondy type of relationship. Like I've started to transition from ending up in situations where I am being controlled or constantly, basically emotionally, verbally abused. Like I have started to transition out of that. And I will tell you, there are healthier people and situations, and there are people out there that don't think you're sensitive, but there are people who are like, yeah, you deserve more respect. There are people who are on that same level, and you get to go find those people, and they exist. So allow yourself to, and allow yourself that, okay? So I will say that you're allowed to have big feelings. You're allowed to be messy with it here and there. Like, you're not gonna be perfectly reacting to everything. Like, the last thing I want to do is go back to this idea that we have to heavily monitor our feelings to the point where we're controlling them again. I think once we get around healthier people and once we stop getting constantly triggered by the wrong people and once we nurture ourselves, we will start to already have a better, more like balanced handle on our emotions. And if we are, if you're the type of person that is now in a state of constant anger because you have such strong beliefs about how people treat each other, whether that's like whatever's going on in the government and you're like, and you are protesting it, like whether you have like a voice online and you're always, wanting to be the one that speaks out against discrimination and whatever is offensive, like maybe you have to be the loud, angry, sad one for everyone else that couldn't be. Like, and I will say, if you know that about yourself, if you feel this deeper draw or like this deeper need to speak up, and I think that's most of us in some ways, like, and if it's gonna turn out angry, then maybe you gotta be the angry bitch, Like, I think everyone has a different part and a different role in revolution, We have our protesty people, we have the angry bitches, we have the angry person, like we have the angry woman of color who is screaming all the time because you know what? That woman needed to be, because the other women that couldn't say anything, like she is feeling their feelings for them. She's expressing everything she needs to for them. So at that point though, that is expressive, that is necessary sensitivity. Maybe you need to be oversensitive. Some people need to be loudly offended and be loud about how they're offended in order for things to change. So let me just say the sensitivity isn't really an issue unless it becomes manipulative by whatever party, you know? Like the sensitivity is, again, any sort of feelings, anything that comes up like that, like is always the signal for something obviously needs to change. But yeah, if you want to live out your life, like I don't want to heavily regulate my emotions, but I want to take care of myself. I don't want to have to be like perfectly, like, I guess there's some ways where you don't have to talk like you're in a therapy session every time with your partner, but like you want to have a reasonable amount of like emotions, but still have a healthy relationship. You can do that, you know? Let yourself be sensitive, and we get to use that, and like it's also necessary. And yeah, it's also not going to be a constant in your life too. Like, yeah, maybe I want to be balanced in a certain way, but I obviously have my times where I want to be an angry bitch, and it only makes sense. And like, I have to rant in order to get all my points out. You have to be angry sometimes. There is necessary anger. Okay, well, that was a big topic. But anyway, peace and love. Take care of yourself. Okay, bye-bye.